Hey YouTube, welcome back to another video and thanks for joining me. So if you've clicked on this video, I take it you want to learn a little bit more about betta fish. So if that's something that interests you, then make sure you stay tuned because we're delving into that right after this. So a lot of people refer to these fish as betta fish, Siamese, fighting fish, Japanese fighting fish, whatever you want to call them. Now they do originate from Thailand and tend to live in rice paddies and shallow pools of water. They're usually filled with organics. Now a betta fish's lifespan is roughly anywhere between 2 to 5 years. Now I think you probably find with sort of line breeding that they can reduce their lifespan and sometimes you get a year or two out of a betta fish. But I found if you get them from breeders, they tend to last a lot longer and the gene pool is a lot stronger. So you may get 5 years out of your betta fish if you buy it from the right person. So these are a type of labyrinth fish similar to gouramis where they can also gulp air from the surface as well as absorb oxygen in the water. But these are a massively common fish in the hobby and probably one of the most abused fish, and we'll delve into that a little bit later. So what my biggest advice would be, if you're watching this video now, don't just watch this video all the way through. Make sure you watch this and then go on to view other people's videos, because the more information you gather, the better you'll be at looking after your betta fish, Siamese, fighting fish, whatever you want to call it. So in terms of a tank size, now there's a lot of debate online about what you should be doing in terms of tank size. A lot of people will keep them in small vases or jars. Now that isn't the right way to keep them. Now my opinion is that it should be a 5-gallon tank or over. Now when I talk about gallons in this video, I'm referring to US gallons. So those of you not in the US, you can convert that yourselves. Now a lot of people will say that you can keep them in 2.5-gallon tanks. You probably can, but if you think about it, would you want your fish to thrive or just survive? If it was me, I would not want to live in this room constantly. I would need or want other room to have an active mind and just to keep myself interested. So my opinion would be a 5-gallon, and the bigger the better. Now one thing I'd suggest with the betta fish is they do and can jump. So as you've seen me, of those of you who watch my videos normally, I've had lids to any of my tanks with betta fish in just to avoid that horrible surprise of coming in and seeing a betta fish on the floor. Now a lot of people do keep betta fish in bigger tanks in a community tank, and we'll go on to tank mates and whether that's a good idea or not later in the video. But I think that it does go to show that betta fish will use the space if you give it to them, and your focus should be on making that fish thrive in your care and doing everything you can to give it the best life possible. So in terms of tank temperature, now I always try to keep my betta fish around the 80-degree Fahrenheit mark. Now anywhere between 78 and 80 is where you need to be. There's a lot of myths online that you don't need heaters or filters in a betta fish's tank. Now I don't agree that's the case, because they don't want to live at room temperature. They want to be anywhere between about 78 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, if you were going to go one side or the other, cold or hot, you're better off keeping your betta fish at a higher temperature rather than a lower temperature. You might find your betta fish is quite sluggish and not very active in a cold tank. Now, that's not to say they should live in one extreme or the other. About 80 degrees is absolutely perfect. So if you keep them at a too low a temperature, their metabolism will slow down, they won't be able to digest their food, and you can have all sorts of problems from that, whether they're bloating or they suffer from illness. And the same with a higher temperature. If you were to exceed 84, 85 degrees, you're potentially going to over time cook your fish and it's not going to live as long. So try and keep them around the 80-degree mark. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I always recommend a filter in your tank. Now, a lot of people think that a betta fish doesn't need a filter because they generally live in dirty water. Now, it may look like that because there's a lot of broken down organics in the water. They tend to live in sort of black water areas. And that doesn't mean the water's dirty, because the water flowing through all those organics does filter the water and is generally quite clean. So a betta fish will always need just the same water quality as any other fish, and I'd always recommend you doing a weekly water change minimum. Now this does depend on your tank size. Now I have a 5-gallon tank and I find that a 50% water change once a week does the trick. But if you've got a smaller tank, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, you're probably going to have to do 2 or 3 water changes a week. Now something else to consider when you're looking at the correct filter for your fish is flow, because betta fish naturally don't like a lot of flow. A lot of betta fish have big long flowing tails, and if you've got a big canister filter rocking around the tank, then the fish is just going to get blown all over the place. So I would suggest to hang on the back filter or a very small internal filter. If you've got a low flow canister filter, that's great. But you can diffuse the flow as well by changing the output towards the glass, or you could put some sponge over it. And you can also get some adjustable filters as well. And that's probably the best bet for you if you're not sure, because if it's too strong, turn it down. Now the reason you want to keep a filter in your tank is because it gets rid of a lot of ammonia, organics, it gets rid of any nitrates as well, which is something you really want to keep clean for your betta fish. They may look dirty in the wild, but they definitely don't appreciate that. And again, goes back to help your fish thrive and just not survive. Betta fish have been in the aquarium hobby and really common in fish stores, online, and you won't struggle to find a betta fish. Now over time they have developed to put up with different types of water, hard, soft, and that isn't quite as important. They naturally come from softer water, so if you can provide that, great. But my biggest advice to anybody with any sort of fish, unless they're particularly specialist, is keep that consistency, keep doing those weekly water changes, keep everything as close as you can to a routine, and you shouldn't go far wrong. Now, if you're new to fish keeping, these can be a good starter fish, but the smaller the aquarium you go, the less stable your tank's likely to be. So the bigger the tank, the easier it is to keep an eye on the parameters. So if you're new to fish keeping, then a small tank is probably the best way to start out. Now, I would recommend, like I said earlier, a 5-gallon or bigger tank, and that should make it easier for you to manage the parameters and for things not to spike and you have less issues with your betta fish. Now, if you're doing water changes on your betta fish or any other fish for that matter, make sure you're adding a good dechlorinator into the water. Now that just removes any sort of hard minerals, removes chlorines and chloramines, which can be dangerous and hazardous to your fish. Now I use Seachem and it's the best dechlorinator I've found. It's very concentrated, lasts a long time. So I'll leave the links down in the description to any of the items I mentioned in today's video as well. So if you want to go and check those out, make sure you do. Now, if you are doing a water change as well, making sure that the water you added back into your tank is as close to the temperature it was in the tank originally. Now, if you add cold or hot water to the tank, and it could shock your fish and potentially kill it, so make sure that you are matching it as close as you can. Now, a lot of people say that they like to remove their betta fish when they're doing water changes because they feel doing water changes with them in the tank stresses them out. Personally, I've never done that, and I think removing a fish from his normal enclosure, his normal surroundings is probably more stressful. Now that's personal choice, that's not to say that I've got any information to say that's correct, but I know that that can probably be a bit more stressful than taking them out of the tank, putting them in something new, and then putting them back in again. Now when it comes to feeding your betta fish, they do have very small stomachs, so I wouldn't recommend overfeeding because one, it can cause you some water issues and causing you have problems through sickness with that. As well, I think that you're better off feeding once or twice a day small portions, just because betta fish will eat and eat and eat. So don't be fooled by their little derpy faces saying, "I'm hungry, I want food," when you've just fed them. So they will eat and eat and eat themselves to death. So make sure that you're feeding little and often. Now the biggest thing to consider with betta fish would be to give them a variety in their diet. The same with any fish or any animal, the variety will do them a world of good. Now they're primarily carnivorous animals, so they tend to eat more protein-based foods. So you can get that in pellet form, flake form. You can also use freeze-dried bloodworms. I use those from time to time, as well as frozen foods like bloodworms, daphnia, brine shrimp, and also live food. So again, live bloodworms, daphnia, things like that. So they'll love those and love you forever if you feed them those. There's also things like bug bites and so many different types of food. Now in terms of pellet foods, my go-tos are always NTL Labs. I use this one as a general one, which is great. There's another 2 different types. One's actually got a betta fish on it. And lots of brands will target betta fish food as well. There's a micro crumb one there as well. So, and I've probably got 10, 12 other foods I feed my betta fish on a regular basis, and I think that variety is key. Again, I'll leave links down in the description for anything we're talking about in this video as well, and I definitely recommend checking out NTL Labs. They're not sponsoring this video, just a food that I would definitely recommend you check out. Now another massively controversial topic with betta fish would be tank mates. Can you house other fish with betta fish? Well, I tell you for definite, don't put a betta fish with another betta fish, whether that be a male and female, and I don't really agree with sorority female tanks either. Now, I did try this once, maybe 2 years ago, didn't have very good success, had 4 female betta fish and there was one dominant who terrorized the whole group. Now I did have to get rid of those betta fish because they were getting bullied and kept the remaining one. So a lot of people will say they do it. Personally, I wouldn't take the risk. Now, you definitely can't house 2 male betta fish, as their other name suggests. They will fight and fight to the death. So even if you've got a tank with a betta fish next to another betta fish, get a divider, don't stress them out. Now, personally, I've never kept other fish with my betta fish. Now, I am going to attempt this in a future build. So if you're not subscribed to this channel and you want to see how these things go, or any of the other animals or enclosures in my room, I definitely recommend hitting that subscribe button and that notification bell. Now, things I would consider are some tetras, rasboras, potentially even some platies. Now, as well as, because a lot of the time betta fish will spend a lot of time at the top of the water or the top end, so corydoras are perhaps a good choice, and keeping your tank clean, getting all the muck up into the water column, and then hopefully that'll be taken out by your filter. Now, a lot of people ask whether you keep shrimp with them. Again, I'd imagine they become prey to a lot of betta fish, but every betta fish is different, and some will probably accept friends and some definitely won't. So it's at your own risk, trial and error, and you may lose fish in the process. Now, something you could probably safely keep with a betta would be snails, and that would be great just for something additional interest in the tank, as well as maybe a bit of company for the fish, but also keeping your tank clean, keeping on top of that algae, and just generally having something else in there. Now, what do you need to add into your betta fish's tank? Well, betta fish they are very intelligent fish, and the more things you add into the tank, the more interest they'll have and a bit more mental stimulation for them. Now, if you have a very small tank, you don't want to be putting a big piece of bogwood or a massive rock in there, limiting the swimming space. You need to consider that. But things are great to add in there are live plants. Now, betta fish like to rest on things like that from time to time. They like a bit of cover, as well as they may use those plants floating at the top to help them make their bubble nests. Now, if you want to add decoration in there and you're adding bogwood or rocks, just make sure that none of those items have sharp edges, because they can tear up the betta fish's fins or give them scratches, because they do wedge them in themselves in places from time to time, and the last thing you want is them tearing up their fins. Now, if you want to add a substrate in there as well, obviously if you're adding plants, you can need a planted substrate of some kind, and they will appreciate that as well. But overall, try and give your betta fish a nice environment that will mentally stimulate them, is a big enough tank for their life to thrive and not just survive. And if you love your betta fish, that'll be no problem. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video today and you've taken something from it. Now, as I said earlier, don't just rely on this video. Make sure you go out and look at a wealth of different information, and the more information you have, the better equipped you'll be to look after your new fishy friend. If you're new to this channel, this is the first video you're watching, then please show me some encouragement and some support by going through and checking out my videos, hitting that subscribe button, make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads. There's also some merch for sale as well, which I don't promote enough probably, and you can check that out in the links in my channel, or I'll put links down in the description. Also, this betta fish t-shirt as well, if you can see, betta life. So give your fish a betta life and give yourself a better life. Get a t-shirt, support the channel. Thanks very much. But as always, drop me a like to show YouTube are enjoying this sort of content. Drop me a comment if there's anything else you'd like to know. But I think that's enough of me waffling on for one day, and I'll see you in the next video.